When writing a film review, there are usually a few basic questions I have to get answered before I feel comfortable weighing in on a topic. Those questions can range from a variety of things, such as what was the budget, when was it made, what was the intent, etc. But after watching 2013's The Lone Ranger, I've been going mad over one singular question.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
Now, before we begin, I know some of you out there might think it a stretch for me to call the Lone Ranger a superhero. After all, he doesn't even have any superpowers. However, neither do Silverhawk or the Phantom, and yet I've already covered those films on this channel, so what makes the Lone Ranger any different? I think it has to do with the time period in which the character was created. Though many people understand Superman as being the first example of a modern superhero, taking the pages of Action Comics in 1938, the Guinness Book of World Records lists the Phantom as the first ever superhero, being created by Lee Falk in 1936. However, I disagree with both of these assessments. While I can understand why one would choose to accept Superman as the first modern superhero, as the Man of Steel was the first costume crusader to display superhuman abilities, as I stated before in regards to the Phantom, Superman was absolutely not the first crime fighter to ever wear a cape or hide his identity. That distinction goes to Zorro, who first took to the pages of All Story Weekly in a 5-part series written by Johnston McCulley, all the way back in 1919. Almost 20 years before the Man of Steel, Zorro stood as a pillar of justice and a model of New Age storytelling. But I'm not reviewing any of the Zorro films. Yet. So where does the Lone Ranger come in? In 1933, a radio program aired on WXYZ in Detroit, Michigan. This serial was heavily inspired by Zorro, and followed the story of a masked Texas Ranger and his Native American deputy who traveled the West bringing outlaws to justice. The show was called The Lone Ranger, and it proved very popular at the time, later giving birth to a spin-off show by the name of The Green Hornet. Perhaps you've heard of it. These were in fact your first superheroes. And though through the years our heroes would grow wings and soar to heights we would never have imagined, these classic characters still have their place in media, even today. But you wouldn't be able to tell that by watching this piece of shit. We start off in 1933. Hey, that's the same year the Phantom's father died! Sorry, just thinking about a good movie. Anyway, we're introduced to this kid at a carnival. He's looking through, I guess, the history section of the carnival? What? When he runs into, Jesus Christ, that's too much CGI. Why did they think this looked good? This is Tonto. And before we go any further, I have to address the elephant in the room. Tonto is Native American. Johnny Depp, the actor that plays him, is not Native American. At best, this is mildly distracting. At worst, it's really fucking racist and oh my god, they shouldn't have done this. Also, the audio channels in this scene are paying way too much attention to the chewing of those peanuts, which I just absolutely hate. Fuck off with that jump scare. Why is it here? The boy talks to a fairly senile Tonto. Why is he like this? It's very distracting, and I'm fairly certain nobody wanted to see this. He begins telling the story of the Lone Ranger. Oh, it's gonna be one of those movies, where it's all just a story, and every now and again we'll cut back to the present day, completely ruining the flow of the already too long movie. Oh yeah, did I mention? This movie is 2.5 hours long. Why? Why is it that long? Don't get me wrong, you can make good movies that are long. Just look at Braveheart. I love all 3 hours and 15 minutes of that movie. But here it just drags on. The first 30 minutes don't even need to be there. It's mostly just a big train jacking that leads to the escape of the outlaw Butch Cavendish, who, if you're unfamiliar with the story of the Lone Ranger, well, why don't I just tell you the story of the Lone Ranger? But not with this movie. This movie sucks. Instead, let's look at the 1949 pilot episode of the Lone Ranger TV show. The Lone Ranger. Dan Reed is a Texas lawman who's hot on the trail of a wanted outlaw. This outlaw, Butch Cavendish, knows the Rangers on his trail and sets up an ambush in the canyons. He and his gang kill every last Ranger that rode with Reed, including his brother John. Or so they thought. The bodies were found by a Native American man by the name of Tonto, who buried them, but upon burying John's body, realized he was still alive, and spent the next few days nursing him back to health. When the ranger came to, he fastened a mask from his brother's vest, and vowed to bring Cavendish to justice. With his white horse Silver and his new friend Tonto at his side, the Lone Ranger was born. It's a classic story, I'd argue. So how does the 2013 film manage to fuck it up? Well, for one, they made John a pacifist. That's right, the gun-wielding masked Avenger of the West doesn't carry a gun.
No, I don't believe him.
That's the same as making the Punisher pro-gun control, or Batman an acting member of the NRA. It completely undermines the entire character. Speaking of undermining characters, who the fuck thought this was okay?
Greetings, noble spirit horse.
To be fair, Johnny Depp does his best with what he's got, but it's still not okay. At all. What if tomorrow Scarlett Johansson came out with a movie where she played an Asian lady? She'd get blasted by the media. What's, huh? She already did that? Fuck. Why? Okay, a quick message to my fellow white people. Stop trying to be other races. Just stop. Except Robert Downey Jr., he's fine. Back to the movie, where we're stuck for 2.5 hours with a pansy-ass bitch of a Texas Ranger and the single most racist depiction of a Native American I've ever seen in my life. These are our two leads. Needless to say, I hate them both. Their on-screen dynamic does nothing to aid with this, as the two do nothing but argue with each other the entire film. It's already very difficult for me to like these drastically reimagined characters due to the nature of their disrespectful reimagining. But now, add on top of that the fact that they don't even like each other. The original Lone Ranger and Tonto were a well-oiled machine that by the end of the pilot's 3-episode arc, really grew a deep respect and understanding of one another. This made their dynamic fun to watch, as it was interesting to see their different backgrounds and understandings of the world pool together in service of a shared goal. In this reboot, the two are insufferable, constantly at each other's throats and undermining the other's goals. I see what the writers were going for. It's your typical unlikely allies story, but it really just doesn't work here. It's hinted at during the train escape that Tonto is a criminal. This is never fully explained, and clearly only presented as a means to spark distrust between the two. However, this is wholly unnecessary, as the general view of Native Americans at the time would have been enough to elicit the same effect. It also would have made for a more compelling story device, as we'd get to see John overcome some of his own prejudices. It also would have made more sense, story-wise, as after the train crashes and the two should have definitely died, Tonto gets arrested and thrown in a local jail cell, only to not be in that cell the next time we see him. The only acknowledgement of this is the young boy pointing out that Tonto's story doesn't make sense. Just because you point out a plot hole doesn't make it not a plot hole. It just means you're a bad writer. It's the writing equivalent of putting a wet floor sign on a piss-soaked rug. Just get rid of the rug. Trim off the first 30 minutes and start the movie with Butch already on the run. Now, I'm gonna keep saying this because it's really the only semi-positive thing I can say about this film. And that's, I get what they were trying to do. Provide a little backstory as to why Butch is on the run. Show him as an outlaw, escaping custody and robbing trains. But like most things this film tries to do, it's wholly unnecessary, as the scene of Butch slaughtering the Texas Rangers provides a far better introduction to the character, displaying his ruthlessness in all its depravity, while also acting as the inciting incident leading to our hero's creation. Establishing why he's on the run only serves to pad the runtime, instead of providing a new insight into the antagonist, like it should. When the scene does come nearly 40 minutes into the film, and we get the story's true start, it's just okay. I much prefer the original, where the Rangers realize there's no way out, so they dismount and fight to the death. This film has them fighting while trying to escape on horseback, which is fine. I really did like how Dan, John's brother, died. It was a bit more emotional as he died turning back to get his brother, causing him to slow down and get shot. However, I do like the placement of the bodies much more in the original, with Dan and John dying much farther apart, rather than in each other's arms. I feel like the separation of the brothers shows more clearly the indiscriminate nature of the massacre, and the loneliness and finality of death. The way the camera pans the bodies in the original is also really unnerving. But when they try it here, it just feels forced. Nothing about this scene is subtle in the remake. They literally have Butch carve Dan's heart out. Because, I don't know, he's evil? And that's what evil people do, I guess? Tonto finds the bodies and loots them, which is way out of character for Tonto. In fact, most of the things Tonto does are way out of character. Unless you take into consideration that this is not Tonto. No. This character, for all intensive purposes, is Captain Jack Sparrow. Need proof? Just watch as I masterfully use my eyes to see that this is clearly the same fucking character. Now why would they do that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to these two fellas. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, two of the credited writers on this film. You know what other films they wrote? Every Pirates of the Caribbean film, even the shitty ones. These men aren't the only ones responsible for this atrocity of filmmaking. I also blame the film's director, Gore Verbinski, who no doubt had a hand in Depp's casting, as he directed the first 3 Pirates movies, and Rango. So what I think happened was, after the Pirates trilogy, Disney was hurting for some money. So they dug up an old IP in The Lone Ranger, and they said, hey, didn't Gore just get done with a Western? Let's put him on this. Gore comes in, says, cool, I'm in, but I don't know what the fuck to do with this Tonto character. And the studio says, just give the part to Johnny Depp. He'll figure out something. And that's how we got this piece of shit. They literally drag these characters through shit. Here's a fun little plot point. What if the Lone Ranger was fucking his brother's wife, and his kid was actually the Ranger's kid? Will it have any relevance to the story? No, but fuck it. It's important we have this in the movie. Otherwise it might be too short. How long is it again? Oh yeah, it's almost 3 goddamn hours! Also, in the original, Dan and John were the last of their family. So when Dan is killed and John dons the mask to avenge him, it feels justified. However, in the new film, John has a family to take care of, which makes donning the mask and running around Texas wrangling up outlaws feel highly irresponsible. John has people to go back to. He just chooses not to. And I wish I could describe the plot in more depth, but there really isn't one. Most scenes just happen with no real through line between them, which makes the final film feel less like a coherent story and more like a series of random events with some reoccurring characters. I hate the bank robbery scene at the beginning. It's shot like a goofy comedy and presents a wildly different tone than is present in most of the rest of the film. Speaking of the tone, I'm not sure what the fuck it is. At times, it wants to be a goofy Western buddy cop film, and at other times, it feels like Bone Tomahawk, but nowhere near as good. It also tries to do the Marvel thing where characters tell witty jokes to each other throughout the film, but that doesn't really come off well here. The reason Marvel is so good at quippy humor is because they've established a roster of well-developed, likable characters, and they use witty banter as a way to flesh out character relationships. The comedy in those films works with the plot, not against it. Here, every time the writers want to make a quick joke, they stop the entire fucking movie to do so, which makes the already 2.5-hour movie feel that much longer.
Something very wrong with that horse.
Look, I'm not gonna lie. If it weren't for the runtime, I wouldn't have hated this film as much as I did. But as it stands, this is the worst superhero movie I've ever seen. There are good things to say about this film. It's shot pretty competently. The final action scene is pretty entertaining. And I guess technically it does at least qualify as a movie. But it is way too long, and there are far too many glaring problems for me to recommend this film to anyone. You want a better time? Go watch Max Steel. At least that movie's short. Actually, fuck that. Go watch the original ABC show from 1949. It's a damn classic, and 1,000 times better than this overproduced pile of horse shit. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like the video if you did, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any other videos like this. I'm getting a little better. I'm still not 100%, but hopefully I'll be getting there soon. I've been your friendly reminder to get vaccinated, and I'll see you next time.